The dusty planet was silent, its cracked surface stretching for miles, broken only by the occasional rock formation. It was a place few dared to visit. But for Captain James Carter, it was just another stop on his search for something valuable. He had been in space for months, hopping from one barren world to the next. But today something felt different. Something in the air made him uneasy. He had landed his small shuttle in a secluded area, far from any known settlement. The scanners had picked up strange energy readings coming from beneath the surface, something buried deep within the planet. Intrigued, he decided to investigate. He wasn't expecting to find anything alive. In fact, he expected nothing more than the usual alien ruins or forgotten technology. But as he moved deeper into the planet's caverns, he came across something unexpected. A young alien woman, shackled by glowing metallic bracelets, sitting on the cold stone floor. She had long silver hair that shimmered even in the dim light of his flashlight. Her pale blue skin glowed faintly, and her eyes were wide with fear and confusion. She stared at him as he approached, her body tense, ready to fight or flee. James paused for a moment, unsure what to do. She didn't look like any of the aliens he had encountered before. She wasn't violent, but she wasn't welcoming either. He could see that she was trapped, her wrists bound by two bracelets that hummed with energy, holding her in place. The chain seemed to be alive, pulsing with power. "Hey, are you all right?" James asked softly, crouching down to her level. The woman's eyes flickered with recognition, but then she looked away, as though speaking to him would make things worse. James could feel the weight of her situation. The bracelets weren't just ordinary shackles. They were powerful, designed to suppress her strength and prevent her from escaping. He had never seen anything like it before. He glanced around the room, searching for answers. There were no signs of any guards or other prisoners. It was just him and her in this dark, forgotten place. James had a strong feeling she didn't belong here, that she was meant for something more than this prison. "Don't try to fight it," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "These bracelets, they will kill me if I try to remove them. You can't help me." James frowned, his heart heavy with sympathy. He had come here looking for nothing more than answers, but now he had found something, someone who needed help. And help he could give. "I'm not just going to leave you here," he said, his voice firm. "I'll find a way to get those off. You don't deserve to be chained like this." The woman's gaze softened, and for a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. But then her face hardened again and she pulled back as if afraid of what might happen next. "No," she whispered urgently. "You don't understand. If you take them off, I'll be free. But only for a moment. Then they'll come for me. My people. They will never forgive me for breaking the law. If I'm free, they will hunt me down. And they won't. Stop until I'm dead. You don't want to get involved in this." James looked at her, conflicted. He couldn't just leave her in chains, knowing what he had seen. There was something about her that made him feel protective, something that made him want to take the risk even if it meant putting himself in danger. "I'm not afraid of them," James said, his voice calm but determined. "You're not some prisoner. You're a person. You deserve to be free." The woman shook her head, her expression pained. "You don't know what you're saying. If you help me, you'll be signing your own death warrant." James didn't respond at first. Instead, he reached for his tools, a laser cutter hanging from his belt. He wasn't sure how he was going to disable the bracelets, but he knew he had to try. She wasn't just some alien specimen. She was a living being, trapped in suffering. He took a deep breath and set to work. The energy pulses from the bracelets were powerful, but the tool was designed for cutting through metal and technology. He worked carefully, cutting through the metal just enough to disable the power source that held her captive. The woman watched him closely, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't even know me." James stopped for a moment, looking into her eyes. "It doesn't matter. No one deserves to live like this." He pushed through, cutting deeper into the energy source. A spark flew, and for a second, the woman's body tensed as if bracing for impact. But then the bracelets flickered and fell silent. The chains fell to the ground with a soft clink, and the woman's arms were finally free. She gasped, rubbing her wrists where the bracelets had once been. I'm free? Her voice was filled with disbelief. But before James could reply, the ground shook beneath them. A low hum vibrated through the air, followed by distant shouts. The woman's face paled, and her eyes widened in horror. "They're coming," she whispered, looking back at James with desperation. "We have to go. Now." As she spoke, the sound of footsteps echoed in the cavern, and somewhere in the distance a voice called out, "She's free! She's free!" The chase had begun. The ground trembled beneath their feet as they ran. The alien woman, now free of her shackles, moved with surprising speed, her silver hair streaming behind her like a comet in the dim light of the caverns. James struggled to keep up, his boots clattering against the uneven rocks. His heart raced not only from the physical effort but from the rising tension that had settled in the air. He had only just freed her, and now they were both in danger. The voices behind them were getting louder, closer. Whoever had been guarding her was not far off. It was clear they weren't just after her. They were after him, too. The alien woman had been their prisoner for so long that her escape had turned into a battle. And James, by freeing her, had become an unwilling ally in this struggle for survival. "Where do we go?" James gasped, his breath heavy as he caught up to her. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, her sharp eyes scanned the twisting paths of the cavern ahead, calculating the risks. The soft glow from her skin barely lit the way, but she seemed to have an innate sense of direction, as if she could feel the air shift and read the landscape in a way James couldn't. "Follow me," she finally said, her voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "We need to reach the caves. Hart. There's a hidden exit there. If we can get to it, we might stand a chance." James didn't question her. He just followed, keeping a few steps behind to avoid tripping over rocks in the dark. His mind raced, trying to piece together what had just happened. The woman. Who was she? Why had she been chained here in the first place? And what were these people after her for? As they sprinted deeper into the caves, the temperature dropped, and the air became thick with the smell of wet stone. The walls around them were lined with faintly glowing symbols, an ancient language James couldn't decipher. His eyes flickered over the markings, wondering if they held any significance, but there was no time to stop and investigate. "We're not alone," the woman muttered under her breath, her voice tense. "They're getting closer." James's pulse quickened. He had no weapons, no allies, and nowhere to hide. He had never felt more vulnerable, but at the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling that the woman he was helping wasn't just an innocent bystander in all of this. She wasn't just running from danger. She was part of something much bigger. And whatever it was, he had been dragged into it. Suddenly, the woman stopped, her body tensing like a bowstring about to snap. She looked back at James, her eyes wide with urgency. "We need to split up," she said quickly. "I can't have them follow us both. They'll track us down faster if we're together. You'll be safer alone." "What?" "No." James started to protest, but she cut him off. "It's the only way." She grabbed his arm, her grip strong and desperate. "I'll draw them away. You need to make it to the heart of the cave. Once you're there, I can lead you out. But you have to trust me." James stared at her, torn. He didn't want to be separated from her. Not now. Not when the danger was so real. But as he met her gaze, he saw something in her eyes. Something that told him this wasn't a request. She was giving him a choice, but it was clear what she expected him to do. "Go," she urged. With no other choice, James nodded and pulled away, running in the opposite direction. His heart hammered in his chest, the echo of his own footsteps, ringing louder and louder in his ears as he sprinted down the dark corridor. His mind raced, replaying everything that had happened in the past few hours. The strange planet, the woman in chains, the bracelets that had bound her. And now, the sudden shift of their fates. He didn't know if he could trust her completely, but one thing was clear. She wasn't just some helpless prisoner. She was a fighter, and now somehow he was tied to her in a way he couldn't yet understand. James pushed on, adrenaline surging through his veins. The sound of footsteps behind him grew faint, and he allowed himself a breath, though it came out shaky. The tunnel seemed endless, twisting deeper into the heart of the planet. The further he went, the more he could feel the strange energy pulsing through the walls around him. It was as if the planet itself was alive, aware of their presence, watching them as they moved deeper into its labyrinth. Just as he thought he might finally catch a break, a loud crash echoed from behind him, followed by a high-pitched screech that made his skin crawl. James turned around, heart in his throat. The woman had been right. They weren't alone. The chase was on. The darkness of the cavern swallowed everything. James could barely see 2 feet ahead, yet he kept running. The air felt thick, stifling, and a cold chill crawled down his spine. His footsteps echoed against the stone walls, but the deeper he went, the more unsettling the silence around him grew. It was as if the cave itself had come alive, its very walls pulsing with an energy that made him uneasy. Suddenly, a soft voice broke through the stillness, startling him. "Turn left." James skidded to a stop, nearly losing his footing as he followed her whispered command. The woman's voice, calm, almost as if she knew exactly where they were, guided him through the maze-like caverns. He didn't know how she was doing it. He didn't know how she could be so sure of herself when they were both running blind through this unknown place. But there was something in her voice that made him believe she knew the way. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if the cave itself might be listening. "To the truth," she replied, her voice holding a weight of finality. "You need to understand what you've gotten yourself into." James stopped in his tracks. The air felt colder now, like the cavern had drawn in a deep breath, ready to reveal something long hidden. He turned to look at her, but in the darkness, her face was barely visible. Only the faint glow of her skin gave away her presence. "What do you mean?" His mind raced, filled with too many questions. What had she meant by truth? And why was she still guiding him through this maze? Was this part of her escape plan, or was there something else going on? The woman took a slow, deliberate step forward, her voice steady but tinged with something like sorrow. "You've seen what I was," she said quietly. "But what you don't know is what I am, and why I was chained." James felt his throat tighten. Her words hung in the air like a warning, but she didn't explain further. Instead, she pushed ahead, her movements fluid and practiced. James hesitated for a moment before following her. There was an unspoken tension between them now, a silent agreement that things were about to change. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever truth she was about to reveal, it would pull him deeper into a world he wasn't prepared for. As they continued through the twisting tunnels, the walls began to shift. The dull light of her skin illuminated strange markings that pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. James looked closely, his curiosity growing. "What are those?" he asked, his voice catching in the quiet. "They're not just decorations," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "They're a warning, a sign of what lies ahead." James's unease grew. The air felt heavier now, thicker with something else, something ancient. The walls weren't just glowing, they were alive. He couldn't explain how, but the sense of watching grew stronger with every step. Finally, they reached a large chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow, and in the center of it a pedestal stood, ancient, worn, and covered in strange symbols. The woman stopped in front of it, her eyes locked on the structure as if it held the answer to every question she'd been avoiding. She turned to face James. For the first time, her expression was open, her defenses dropping. "You need to know what this place is, and what I am. This isn't just a cave. This is where I was born, and where I was condemned." James took a step forward, his eyes narrowed in confusion. "Born? Condemned? What do you mean?" She took a slow breath. "I wasn't always a prisoner," she said softly. I was once the leader of my people, the queen of the Voryx. James froze. His mouth went dry. The words seemed impossible, but the sincerity in her voice made him pause. He had thought she was just another fugitive, another alien running from her captors, but a queen? That changed everything. The Voryx were a powerful race, she continued, her voice distant, like she was reliving a memory long buried. We ruled. Over planets, systems, whole galaxies, we were feared, we were worshipped, but that power, it came at a cost. She walked slowly to the pedestal, her fingers brushing over the symbols. I had to make a choice, one that would change the fate of my entire race. I betrayed my own people. I chose compassion over power, and for that, they cursed me. They bound me with those bracelets, condemned me to serve the very empire I once ruled. James stood still, his mind reeling. You were a queen? He repeated, barely able to grasp the weight of her confession. She nodded, her face shadowed with regret. Yes, but no longer. The Voryx will never forgive me for what I've done, and they will stop at nothing to see me brought back in chains, to finish what they started. They believe I betrayed them. But the truth is, they were the ones who were wrong, and I intend to make it right. James's head spun as he tried to process her words. A queen? A ruler of a galactic empire? The weight of the moment pressed in on him. He had freed her, yes, but what had he truly freed? A leader? A fallen monarch? Or something even more dangerous? Before he could speak, the cavern suddenly shook again. The vibrations grew stronger, the walls trembling with an unmistakable energy. They've found us, she whispered. We don't have much time. The ground shook violently, knocking James off his feet. His head struck the cold stone floor of the cavern, sending stars bursting across his vision. He groaned and quickly scrambled to his knees, his heart pounding in his chest as the tremors intensified. The woman, no, the queen, stood a few feet away, her back to him, staring out into the darkness, her body as still as stone. They're coming, she said, her voice low and cold. There was no fear in it, only determination. James wiped blood from his forehead and staggered to his feet, confusion swirling in his mind. How had they found them so quickly? They'd only just uncovered the truth about who she was, and now everything was falling apart. He hadn't signed up for this. Not this level of danger, but there was no turning back now. Who are they? James asked, his voice tight, trying to ignore the growing pressure in his chest. He could feel the heavy thud of his heartbeat in his ears as he took in the queen's calm but resolute expression. Whoever was coming, they were more than just a simple threat. They were a force, and they would stop at nothing to capture her again. The Voryx, she replied, her gaze never leaving the cavern's entrance. My people, the ones I betrayed, the ones who will burn the stars to find me. And when they do, they'll make sure I never leave this world again. James felt a chill run through him. These weren't just any alien pursuers. The Voryx were legendary. Her empire, once vast and feared, had crumbled when she chose to go against everything her people stood for. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to click, but it only made the situation more complicated. A fallen queen, a galactic empire. The danger wasn't just about running. It was about survival on a level he couldn't comprehend. She turned to face him, her expression grave. We don't have much time. They've already called for reinforcements. Before James could respond, the ground trembled once again, this time with a thunderous crack that made the cave itself groan under the weight of something massive. The air grew thick with static, and the dark, distant rumblings of an engine reached his ears. They're here, she said, her voice sharp now, her posture rigid with tension. James spun around, his eyes scanning the darkness. He could hear, something now faint at first, then growing louder. Mechanical footsteps, metallic, precise. It was like the sound of a massive machine lumbering toward them. But as the rumble grew closer, the shadows around them started to shift. The air crackled with energy, and soon a low hum filled the cavern. A deep robotic voice echoed through the chamber. Her location has been confirmed. The traitor must be eliminated. Capture or kill. James's breath caught in his throat. He looked at the Queen, her traitor. She had condemned her people. She had betrayed them for reasons unknown. But now, they were willing to wipe out anyone who stood in their way to reclaim her. And that included him. "We need to go," she said, her voice urgent but calm. "Now." She turned sharply and sprinted down a side passage, her glowing skin lighting the way. James hesitated for only a second before following, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind them. They were faster now, and the hum of the engines was closer. The Voryx had brought something with them, something big. As they ran through the tunnels, the air seemed to warp, twisting and distorting with each step. The ground slanted down and James's legs burned from the effort to keep up with her. He had no idea where they were going, but the Queen seemed to know the path by heart. The walls around them were slick with moisture and the sharp scent of ancient stone filled the air. "Where are we headed?" James gasped, trying to steady his breathing. "To the vault," she said, her voice distant. "It's our only chance." James frowned, but he didn't ask more questions. The vault? What was she talking about? What could be hidden in this forgotten cave that would save them now? But there was no time to think about it. As they rounded another bend, James's foot hit something soft, and he stumbled forward, barely catching himself. When he looked down, he froze. A body. A lifeless Voryx soldier lay sprawled across the floor, his armor dark and charred. The body had been there for some time, but it still sent a wave of horror through James's chest. The soldier was clearly dead, but the faint shimmer of light around his form still glowed, evidence of the advanced technology that powered the Voryx. The Queen stopped for a moment, her eyes locking onto the body. He was one of them. She muttered under her breath. "They've already been here. This isn't just an escape. It's a trap." James didn't have time to process the words. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and the ground shook once more as a massive ship came into view, its engines roaring. It was enormous, at least twice the size of their shuttle, and it hovered just outside the cavern entrance. The doors began to open slowly, revealing a shadowy figure silhouetted against the light. "That's them," the Queen said quietly. "And that's their leader." James looked at the Queen. She didn't look afraid, but he could see the tension in her jaw, the way her hands tightened into fists. The fight was coming, and this time there would be no more running. The sound of distant engines reverberated through the caverns, growing louder with each passing second. James could feel the heat of pursuit closing in, a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. The air was thick, almost suffocating as the Queen led him through winding passages, her speed unrelenting despite the chaos around them. Behind them, the massive Voryx warship hovered above, its presence casting a looming shadow over the cave. But the Queen's expression was unwavering, her face focused on the path ahead, her hands clenched into fists. She had never wavered in her resolve, not once since the moment they had first met. Yet now, there was something different in her eyes. A flicker of hesitation, quickly buried. James glanced at her. "Are you sure we can outrun them?" His voice was strained from the constant running, but he kept his pace steady, refusing to fall behind. "We don't need to outrun them," she replied, not breaking her stride. "We need to outsmart them." James wasn't sure he understood what she meant, but before he could ask, they came to an abrupt halt in front of a towering stone wall. It looked ancient, etched with cryptic symbols and worn by time. It was impossible to tell what lay beyond it, but the Queen didn't hesitate. With a quick motion, she placed her palm on the wall. A soft glow rippled across the stone surface, and then slowly, a portion of the wall slid open, revealing a dark passageway leading further into the heart of the planet. James blinked in surprise. What is this place?" The Queen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped through the opening, beckoning him to follow. "This is the vault," she said, her voice low. "It's where the last remnants of the Voryx's power are hidden." The words hung in the air like a warning. The vault? What was she talking about? For the first time since they'd met, doubt crept into James's mind. If this was some kind of hidden sanctuary, why hadn't she used it sooner? Before he could voice his concerns, the wall behind them rumbled as it sealed shut, locking them in. The only sound now was their own breathing, fast, panicked, but strangely synchronized. The Queen's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light of the passage, her hand still pressed against a series of symbols on the wall. "We have no choice now. If we are to survive, we need help." James turned to her, confusion etching his features. "Help? From who?" But before she could answer, the ground beneath them shifted with a sudden, terrifying tremor. The cave moaned as if it were alive, and James had the overwhelming sensation that they weren't alone. The dim, pulsing light along the walls flickered, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move with a mind of their own. "I've sent a signal," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Someone will answer, but we have to wait." James stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. Someone would answer? Who could possibly help them now? The Vorex were closing in, and he didn't trust anyone in this forsaken place. The echo of footsteps reached his ears, low and steady like a heartbeat. They were coming, but not from the direction he expected. The passage ahead darkened, and someone emerged from the shadows. A figure, tall and cloaked in dark armor, stepped forward, their face hidden beneath a hood. The air around them seemed to shimmer with energy, their presence almost otherworldly. They moved silently with the grace of someone who had spent decades in the shadows, waiting for this very moment. James instinctively took a step back, his hand reaching for his belt, but the Queen held up a hand to stop him. "This is Drax," she said, her voice calm but with an undertone of something wary. "He's the one who can help us." James looked at the cloaked figure, his mind racing. Who was this person? Why would the Queen trust them? The tension in the air was palpable, the quiet exchange between them stretching long and uncomfortable. The figure didn't speak immediately. Instead, they reached into their cloak, withdrawing a small device, something ancient, glowing with strange energy. It buzzed softly in the stillness of the cave, casting a faint light on Drax's face. As they raised it toward the Queen, the device hummed and flickered. "Is it ready?" the Queen asked, her voice barely a whisper. Drax didn't answer with words. Instead, they placed the device against the stone wall, and instantly the ground trembled again. The vault itself seemed to respond, a low vibration humming beneath their feet. And then, with a sharp crack, the wall split open, revealing something James hadn't expected. Another door leading deeper into the heart of the cave. "This is the last chance we have." Drax finally spoke, their voice cold and mechanical. "The Vorex are too close. If we don't act now, we're finished." James stood frozen, his thoughts racing. The Queen had just led them into an ancient underground chamber, and now this mysterious figure, Drax, had opened a hidden path, a way forward. But for what? And why now? What was it they were running toward? "We don't have much time," the Queen said, her tone hardening with determination. "We need to trust him. If we want to survive, we have to move." Without another word, she stepped through the door, Drax following closely behind. James hesitated, but the weight of the Queen's gaze pushed him forward. He followed them into the unknown, unsure of what he was getting himself into, but certain of one thing: his survival depended on them. The deeper they ventured into the heart of the vault, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The stone walls closed in around them, the air thick with dust and the smell of old technology. The flickering lights from the ancient devices on, the walls barely illuminated their path, casting long, jagged shadows that twisted and swirled like ghostly figures. Every step seemed to echo in the silence, every sound amplified in the depths of the cave. James could feel the tension in the air, but he wasn't sure where it was coming from. Was it the looming danger of the Vorex still closing in on them? Or was it the unsettling feeling that someone, was waiting for them in the dark? The Queen walked ahead, her pace steady, but her eyes betraying the conflict inside her. Her normally composed face was taut with anxiety. She knew something they didn't, something that weighed heavily on her conscience. James opened his mouth to ask her what was wrong, but she stopped in her tracks before he could speak. "It's here," she said quietly, almost to herself. "The core. James blinked, his thoughts racing. The core? What was she talking about? They had been running, fighting for survival. But now it felt like they were walking into something much worse. Something ancient, something she wasn't prepared to face. She turned to him, her eyes locked on his with a level of intensity he hadn't seen before. James, I need you to understand something before we go any further. He swallowed hard. The air felt colder now, the walls seeming to press in tighter. He didn't know what she was about to say, but he could already feel the weight of it bearing down on him. This wasn't just a chase anymore. This was something else. What is it? He asked, his voice hoarse. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but the gravity of her words was undeniable. I told you about the Voryx. But there's more. This place, this vault, it isn't just a refuge. It's where the heart of the Voryx power is stored. James's brow furrowed. What do you mean? The core, she repeated, her eyes narrowing as she took a slow step toward the glowing stone pedestal ahead. The light around them pulsed, a faint hum vibrating through the air. It's the source of all their strength, the reason they're able to conquer, to destroy. And it's also the reason I left, the reason I betrayed them. James felt a chill run through him. You left them because of this? He couldn't quite comprehend the depth of what she was saying. She nodded, her voice full of regret. Yes, the Voryx didn't just conquer planets. They did something far worse. They took energy from this core, from the very heart of this planet, and used it to fuel their war. And when I realized the cost of what we were doing, when I saw what it was doing to the people, to the land itself, I couldn't be a part of it anymore. The Queen's gaze turned downward, as if she could still feel the weight of that choice. I destroyed their power source. I destroyed the core. James's eyes widened in shock. You destroyed it? She nodded, but not completely. The Voryx rebuilt it, and now they are coming for me to finish what I started. They'll stop at nothing to reclaim this power. A heavy silence filled the space between them. James's heart pounded in his chest. What do you mean? How are we going to stop them? You can't destroy it again, can you? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath and approached the pedestal, her fingers hovering over it. I can, but it will cost me everything. Everything? James repeated, stepping closer, his confusion turning to concern. What are you talking about? The Queen turned to face him, her eyes filled with a quiet, resigned sadness. The core is not just a source of energy. It's a living thing, an ancient force that feeds off life. When I destroyed it the first time, I nearly died. It drained my strength, my very life force. If I destroy it again, this time for good, I'll have to give up my own soul. I will be consumed by the core. The energy will devour me, and I won't survive. James felt a cold sweat form on the back of his neck. No, you can't. There has to be another way. The Queen shook her head, her expression firm, but full of sorrow. This is the only way to stop them, to make sure they never get this power again. The Voryx will never stop hunting me until I do this. But if I don't, they'll tear this world apart. The weight of her words hit James with the force of a falling star. He couldn't even begin to process what she was saying. But there was no time to think. The Voryx were getting closer, and the very earth around them seemed to groan in anticipation of what was coming. Suddenly the ground trembled, sending a shock wave through the cave. The stone walls cracked and debris rained down around them. James's heart leaped into his throat as the entrance to the vault exploded open, and the shadow of the Voryx warship loomed in the distance. They're here, the Queen whispered, her face hardening with determination. She turned to James, her hand resting on his shoulder. You need to get out of here. I'm going to destroy the core. It's the only way to stop this. James grabbed her arm, desperation flooding his chest. No, you can't. There has to be another way. But she shook her head, her eyes softening with a quiet sadness. There isn't. This is the price I must pay to save everyone. As the ground shook again, the Queen turned back toward the pedestal, her body glowing with energy. James stood there helpless, watching as the woman who had once been a queen prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. The cave trembled violently as the Voryx warship hovered overhead, its engines humming with an oppressive force that shook the very foundation of the vault. The walls around them groaned, as if the planet itself was protesting the chaos above. James stood frozen, his mind struggling to catch up with the gravity of what was unfolding. The queen, the fallen queen, was about to sacrifice everything. The light from the pedestal flickered, pulsing in rhythm with the vibrations that seemed to come from deep within the planet. The queen was standing at the heart of the vault, her hands raised toward the glowing core, her body surrounded by a swirling energy. It was both beautiful and terrifying. Her figure was bathed in light, but her expression was a mixture of pain and determination. "Stop!" James shouted, rushing forward. He couldn't just let this happen. The queen, Lyra, was about to give up everything, her very life, for a cause that wasn't even hers anymore. She was doing this for a galaxy that had rejected her, for a war she had abandoned. Lyra turned to him slowly, her eyes flickering with the same sadness he had seen before. "You don't understand, James. This is the only way." "No." He took another step toward her. "I can't lose you. Not like this. There has to be another way." She looked at him, her expression softening. For a brief moment, the queen was just a woman, someone who had loved and lost, someone who had sacrificed more than anyone should. "I wish there were another way," she whispered. "But the Voryx, they won't stop. Not until they have this power. And I can't live knowing that they're destroying everything. This is my final act of redemption." The words hit him like a punch. He reached out, desperate to stop her, but she was already too deep into the process. The energy around the pedestal crackled, and for a moment it felt like the entire cave was holding its breath, waiting. Suddenly, the warship's weapons fired, a brilliant beam of light that tore through the ceiling, sending rocks tumbling down around them. The Voryx were closing in. Time was running out. "James, you need to go," Lyra said, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "This is my fight now. I've already made my peace." But before he could respond, the ground beneath them cracked open, and a blinding light erupted from the pedestal. The core was reacting, its power building to a terrifying crescendo. It was as though the entire cave was alive, shaking, trembling under the sheer force of the energy being released. "No!" James shouted, but the words were lost in the deafening roar of the power surging from the core. Lyra's hands were glowing now, the energy surrounding her pulsing with an intensity that James couldn't comprehend. She closed her eyes, her face a mask of pure determination. And then, in one final, heart-wrenching moment, she whispered, "I'm sorry," and the energy exploded outward, flooding the cave with blinding light. James threw his arm up to shield his eyes, but the force of the blast knocked him back. The ground beneath him shattered and he tumbled down a jagged slope. For a moment, everything went black. When he opened his eyes, the cave was still, and the light from the core had dimmed. The rumbling of the warship above had stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. He sat up disoriented, his body aching from the fall. The world around him was changing. The very air felt different. Lighter somehow, like the tension that had gripped the planet for so long was finally being released. And then, in the distance, he saw her. Lyra stood amidst the now cooling remnants of the energy, her body flickering, in and out of existence like a fading star. She looked different, radiant, but distant. Her form shimmered as if she were made of light and shadow, the power of the core now fully absorbed by her, but at a great cost. She was fading. "No," James cried, rushing toward her, but she held up her hand to stop him. "I'm not gone yet," she said softly, her voice like a whisper carried on the wind. "I've given everything, but I've stopped them. I've stopped them all." Her smile was bittersweet, and for a moment the fierce queen he had met seemed like a different person entirely, just a woman who had made a choice to give everything, even her own life. You can't do this," James protested, tears welling in his eyes. "You can't leave me like this." Lyra's eyes met his, And in them, he saw not just a queen, but a woman who had found her peace. I've made my peace, James. And you will find yours too. The Voryx will never harm anyone again. The power is gone. The light around her flickered, and her figure began to dissolve, her form breaking apart like dust in the wind. I'll always be with you, she said, her voice fading. Thank you for believing in me. And then, she was gone. James stood there in stunned silence, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on him. The Voryx warship, now a distant memory, no longer posed a threat. The planet was still, and the oppressive tension that had hung over them for so long was gone. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the loss. But in that moment, he knew the universe had changed. The Queen's sacrifice had saved them all, and now for the first time in what felt like forever there was peace. And as the winds of the planet whispered around him, James knew he wouldn't forget her. He would carry her memory with him, her strength, her sacrifice, and the love that had pushed her to do the impossible.